Hello and welcome to Discovering Grays Lake, unveiling the stories and people that make our town so unique. I'm your host, David Wool, and I'm thrilled to bring you this new podcast that explores fascinating stories and experiences of local business owners and community leaders, right here where we call home. Grays Lake Rehabilitation Center is a community-based private practice physical therapy provider. Do you know they have 13 clinical providers with various levels of specialties, including orthopedics, sports, neurology, vestibular, geriatrics, pelvic floor, and aquatic? What? Did I just say they have a pool? Well, they do, and it's the largest indoor warm water pool in Lake County, featuring 2 underwater treadmills and swim currents. And recently added clinical treatment specialties, in layman's terms, shockwave. They have both radial and focus units that are the newest tool in regenerative medicine, available to everyone. They pride themselves on the most current and up-to-date specialized care to keep you moving. If you're looking for physical therapy, make sure to see our friends at Grays Lake Rehabilitation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Discovering Grays Lake. Today I am recording from the corner of Center and Whitney. From a business that's probably one of the oldest businesses in town, right?
I think we're second oldest. Strang's may have been around longer, but we're certainly the oldest family business where it's all been in the same family.
Wow, and
122 years.
122 years.
By the way, I was with your friend Marcia yesterday and her sidekick, Ann Shaw. Well, that might not be fair. Maybe Marcia's the sidekick. But at any rate, they said I was supposed to bust your chops about being the 71st or 72nd podcast when we've been here 122 years. And you finally found your way to corner of Center and Whitney. So I guess they said I should give you a little hard time about that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, girls. I appreciate that. Oh, by the way, we're with Bob Churchill.
So, yeah, okay. Now you know we just said that.
Right, exactly. That's funny. Well, I was trying to wait till the 120th, just to match the years. That's what I was doing.
All right.
It was nothing personal, I assure you. So there's a lot of people in town, and you and I have discussed that a lot of people we've had on the podcast are of a certain age.
Right.
And you brought a great point up to light that there's a big gap in there about especially Grays Lake history that a lot of us don't know.
Right. Sure.
So I know this is a long story, but let's just go back and find out from your past on how you guys actually get here to Grays Lake.
Okay. Well, after the Civil War, so
going back a little bit.
With that, yes. My great-grandfather, who fought in the Civil War and was in the defense of Washington, went down the Shenandoah after Robert E. Lee and ended up at Appomattox Courthouse during the surrender. He decided to come west, and eventually, after a year or two, ended up in Libertyville. And then he was a teacher at a little school there was a building you might remember if you've been around for a while at the corner of 83 and Peterson Road. It looked like a little schoolhouse.
Yes.
Well, it was a little schoolhouse.
I do remember.
And that's where he taught. And then in the summer times, he was what they called a mechanic, basically a contractor. And then he would come into Grays Lake and build houses. So he built a lot of the old houses on Lake Street, including the house that my grandma and grandpa lived in. The big town in those days was Haynesville. So they actually moved to Haynesville, and my grandfather went to the little school at the corner of 120 and Lake Street, which was the Grays Lake Grade School.
Wow.
Which is where my dad went and where I went and where my brother Bill's kids went, so multiple generations there. And now Connie's grandkids go there because it's Westlake Christian Academy. So
and that's the location.
Yeah, so that's the location, 120 on Lake Street. At any rate, so then in 1903, my grandfather had his law degree, and so he came into downtown Grays Lake. He met and married my grandmother, whose family had been from Lakeville Township since 1840.
Oh my gosh.
So they had met and married. She was actually an assistant superintendent of what was called the Rockefeller School. Rockefeller was one of the original names of Mundelein. Mundelein was changed to Mundelein because of Cardinal Mundelein. So there you go, way back.
Yeah, I never knew that.
Yeah, lawyer grandpa marries, school administrator, and they settle in downtown Grays Lake. And Grandpa starts his law practice in the old brick building that you remember across the street that's now been torn down. It's a little park.
Yes.
It was Farmers and Merchants Bank, and he had the corner offices upstairs. And for about 25 years, he was the only lawyer west of Green Bay Avenue here in Lake County. So he was not only the town lawyer, he was the justice of the peace and the postmaster. So I guess in those days you had to do a lot of things.
Wow.
But the town was probably only a couple hundred people at the very most. My great-grandfather helped to build the house at the corner of Oak and Lake. Now there's a much bigger house there. The guy that eventually bought that added on to it, but the side yard was still the same. They used to have clay tennis courts out there, and there was a kind of a barn garage in the back of the place. And after my grandparents died, then my cousin, John Churchill Baumgartner, bought the place, and the Baumgartner family was raised there. His wife taught at was then Lakeview. They changed the names because of Woodview. And so John was admitted to the bar also and came into the practice with my dad. My dad had come in 1940, and then the war came up, and so he went out to the war. He was gone for 4 years. And my grandfather saw this nice young lady who used to work for Louis Beam, the realtor, and kept telling her how wonderful his son was. And when he got home from the war, she would just love to meet him. And then he would send notes back to my father in the war and saying, "Oh, there's this beautiful young lady in Grays Lake. When you get here, you're gonna, love to meet her." And they both decided that they would hate each other when they first met. So a year and a half later, I came along. That worked out.
Right. So he was the matchmaker.
Yeah, he was the matchmaker. I'm sure that he was delighted by the whole thing.
Are you looking for a great time right in the heart of our awesome community? Well, look no further than the Grays Lake Village Center, your one-stop destination for all things fun and fabulous. Picture this: historical downtown vibes with a mix of diverse businesses, an array of unique shops, and delicious restaurants, many with outdoor seating with an option to soak up the sun or shade. But that's not all. The Village Center is where the action is. And just like the weather, it's definitely heating up. There are events that take place all year round for the whole family. But now, you'll even have more options. Fill up your calendar with things to do. Also, take a stroll through Central Park, Gelatin Park, surrounding trails, green spaces, and more activities to keep you and your friends and family active all summer long. And now that the weather is warming up, dive into the Aquatic Center. Open Memorial Day to Labor Day. But wait, there is more. Visit GraysLakeVillageCenter.com to discover an incredible lineup of events that are happening every month. Be in the know. Not sure what you're waiting for, so come on down, soak up the local vibes, and enjoy the experience that's unmistakably local and uniquely Grays Lake. Grays Lake Village Center, where the fun never stops.
So Grandpa was here until sometime in the 60s, maybe a little before that. He had a stroke or a heart attack or something and stopped practicing. And then my dad came in with him, and then in 51, 52, Louis Beam built 3 buildings here. One was a pharmacy, one was Ben Franklin, and one was the professional office building in town. And so we moved from the other side of the street to this side of the street, still the same corner though. And I was probably 5, 6 years old, and I remember helping them move. There were things that they were afraid that if I helped move and dropped coming down the stairs from the Farmers and Merchants Bank building that they would break. So I got to carry down the spittoon and the metal ashtrays and things that if I dropped it wouldn't much matter. Back in those days, everybody chewed or smoked. So there were spittoons in all the offices.
And do you have one of those spittoons still?
I happen to have one under the, if I wasn't talking on the mic, I'd reach down and give it to you.
Right. Wow, interesting.
So that was early 50s. My cousin came in the 60s. Then I came in and graduated from law school in 72, came in then. So I've been here 52 years. And then 5 years later, my brother Bill came in, and my brother Bill's wife taught at Woodview for 30-some years, I think 3rd grade. So a lot of people in town knew Mrs. Churchill over at Woodview. So then we've added on with additional people over the period of time. Some have come, some have gone. My brother has now retired, but I continue on. So,
Right.
Anyway, so that's kind of the base history of the law firm here, 122 years. If you think about it, if you take 1776 as the beginning of our country, this is just about 1 year shy of half of our country's history.
Wow.
To be on this corner. So, you don't do 122s. Yeah, that's a long time. But when you think about it in terms of the history of the country, and you did half of it here,
right.
It's a long time.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So you grew up here. So.
Yeah, when I was born in Victory Hospital, of course. You're
Okay.
in the hospital. But my parents were living with my grandparents at Oak and Lake. So for the first months we were there. Then my mom and dad bought a house that if you come down Park Avenue and you hit Lake, there's 2 big wooden houses right there. Well, as you're facing the lake, the one on the right, my parents bought that. And so my earliest years were in that house. Then my parents decided to build a new house. There was a lot next door, so they built the long brick ranch house that you'll see right on Lake Street, 74 South Lake Street. And we moved there when I was about 5, just after my brother was born, actually. And then my mom lived there for like 65 years until she passed. So, it was a long time our family was there. And then, so born and raised here, went to the Grays Lake Grade School and the Grays Lake High School.
Mm-hmm.
My father didn't go to Grays Lake High School because there wasn't one.
Really?
So at that point, when my dad was getting out of grade school, he decided to go to Libertyville High School.
Okay.
So he used to drive. He and his friends. There was no such thing as a driver's license back then. If you were big enough to sit behind the wheel of the car and go, you went. So he and his friends would go drive down to Libertyville High School every day. But
wow.
Then so Grays Lake High School.
How many people were at the high school then? Do you know what your graduating class was?
I think it was like 160.
Okay.
Something like that.
So
it's pretty
was
small.
Still growing.
Well, it was a couple thousand people. The big growth was in the 80s and late 70s, 80s, and 90s. When all the other subdivisions went in north of Washington Street and up on the end of Harvey Street, which used to stop.
Yep, we used to call it Upper Harvey.
Yeah,
right?
Upper Harvey.
Upper Harvey.
Exactly. So.
Okay, but when we were speaking before, you said something that was really interesting to me. That's saying that Haynesville was the big town.
Yes.
So how does that switch to Grays Lake being populated so much and Grays Lake being?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. Elijah Haynes, who was kind of the founder of Haynesville, was one of the original large landholders in Lake County. And he went into the state legislature, and he became Speaker of the House. And so he was a very powerful person. And so he got into a fight with the railroads over something. So as the railroads expanded to come up this way, they decided to put a station at this dinky little, farm town, Grays Lake.
Right.
And then they skipped over Haynesville and they went to Round Lake. So, yeah, Mr. Haynes,
he must have pissed somebody off.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, take that.
Wow.
So then Haynesville actually, at one point, I think, was disbanded.
We're taking a quick break just to say hello because everybody knows Nano. And Nano knows real estate. And actually, I believe that's the name of her Instagram page. So if you're looking to buy a home, sell a home, or know somebody in the market for a home, contact Nano from Baird & Warner. She's a Grays Lake girl helping out Grays Lake people.
And I know when we were kids, the sign always said Haynesville, population 150 or whatever it was. So, yeah, Haynesville died, then Grays Lake and Round Lake grew because the train stopped at those places.
Very interesting.
So when I was a kid, here's a little railroad story. We used to go down to, we lived on Lake Street, so just go to the end of the end of it then was the railroad tracks. They picked up and dropped off the mail as it came through on the train. So as the train would come through, a bag of mail would come flying out of the mail car.
Oh, wow.
And then there was a thing that kind of looked like an hourglass, and it would have a hook on the top, and maybe a foot and a half below that would be a hook. And in between that, there would be a bag that was kind of like an hourglass, came together in the middle and then spread out both above and below that. And they had a hook on the mail car. And the hook would just go, and they would pick up the bag and sweep it off that device and into the mail car. So I remember going down there and watching as a little kid as they dropped off the mail and picked up the new mail. So
it would never stop. The train wouldn't stop.
No, don't even slow down.
Just throw one out and pick one up.
Kind of a freight train with a mail car and did all the mail. So.
Wow. What a cool thing.
Yeah, very interesting.
Okay,
My mom and dad hated when I would go down and play by the railroad tracks, of course. We used to love to put pennies on the tracks. And
of course.
The train went through, and then you had a nice little guitar pick.
Right.
You know?
That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so growing up here, what other kind of things do you like? I know that it's hard for me even to imagine, like, our town then. Like, what do you do for fun? Where do you go?
Well, there were things that we did, but when we're kids, we're bored. And it's like, oh, we hate this little town. It's so boring. There's nothing to do, okay? But in the springtime, as the carp would come up the creeks, we would go out with spears off of Westerfield at that point, go back into there and spear carp. That was kind of a fun thing. In the summer, we had a sailboat and a canoe and a rowboat, and so you'd spend most of your time on the lake. We lived on the lake, so swimming was constant.
Yes.
My parents put up a big pole with 3 big spotlights on it, so you could swim at nighttime. And they had a raft in the middle of Grays Lake in those days before kind of young kids tore it up or something, and the man who owned it got tired of constantly fixing it back up and putting it out every spring and taking it in every fall. But that was a riot. I mean, that's where you get in your rowboat or you swim out to it, and that was probably the deepest part of the lake. So everybody was having a good time on the raft. And then we had a nice big backyard, played football, baseball in the backyard. When it came to be winter, we would shovel off an area and we'd play ice hockey. We could play at nighttime with the spotlights out there. And it was always good when there was a little bit of snow, so you could create some banks. Because on those days when the ice was absolutely a sheet of glass all the way across, you hit a hockey puck, okay.
Yeah, out of bounds is really out of bounds.
You hit the puck, yeah, you chase it down. Or if the football went in the water, you're going in the water if the waves are going the other way. So or baseball. So there was there's all that stuff. And then as we got a little bit older, to the point where we're on bikes but not yet cars, Tasty Freeze, that was the place to go. And a lot of us at that point were trying to learn how to play the guitar. Not that ever worked out very well for me, but we'd go down, and Mr. Hook had the Tasty Freeze, and he was always so kind to put a bunch of tables out towards the alleyway, a little bit closer to the alley, to allow his ice cream customers to be up in front. And it was a gathering pretty much every night that you'd go down there and do stuff at the Tasty Freeze. So that was always fun. So
that's cool. So you guys set up back there and played your guitars?
Yeah,
little entertainment.
Yeah, and then as we became old enough to drive and took our driver's training instruction through the high school, Mr. Iserman was one of the big driver training instructors, our football coach. And then once you had a driver's license, then it was like freedom. You could get out of Grays Lake. And so then in high school, what we used to do is, we were never sure who was going to drive, but you'd meet maybe at the Tasty Freeze or the Dog and Suds or something, and everybody would pile into one car, and then we would drive down to Libertyville, because they had it wasn't really Dog and Suds, but it was something like that in Libertyville, and they had the prettiest girls. Oh. So that's where we would always go down there first. And then we would drive into Waukegan and what they called Scoop the Loop. Of course, that became famous. But back in those days, it was just driving up and down Genesee, seeing who was there, taking a ride out to the lakefront, see who was parked, making out down at the lakefront. And then on the way back, we drive through Lindenhurst, which was nothing at that point. Poor Lindenhurst never had a village really to speak of like we have here in Grays Lake. Mm-hmm. But then we'd loop back through there because a lot of the guys that were from our area lived up and went, they live up in the manor, or not the manor, but Lake Miltmore and Phoenician Village in that area, and went to Grays Lake High School. So loop back through there, go to people's houses, whatever.
Right.
So, and then off to college.
Wow. Now, where did you first go to college?
I went to Northwestern
for
4 years, and then I went to University of Iowa for my law degree.
Okay, so obviously your family has a huge background in law.
Yeah.
Right? So growing up and, watching your grandfather, your father, did you ever have anything else that you wanted to do, or did you know that you wanted to follow?
I think when I was like 2 or 3 or 4, I probably wanted to be a train engineer and a fireman.
Okay. Right.
And then I do remember when I was very young, sitting in the barber chair down here downtown Grays Lake, and Vic Magnus was the barber, and he said, your daddy's my lawyer, and someday you're going to be my lawyer when your daddy's not around. And it's like, oh, okay. So, there was never any thought for me to do anything other than just to follow in the family footsteps. So,
wow, that's great. And it seems like you had some excellent role models.
My dad and my grandpa were, when you're the justice of the peace in town,
yes,
you do not get out of line.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm sure that you had to watch your P's and Q's a little bit more, too, right?
Yeah. No, boy, if I had ever gotten in trouble at all, that would have been a black mark on the family.
Right.
You can't do that, especially when your grandpa and your dad were justice of the peace. So,
right.
Yeah, even when, I remember when I was a kid, if my mom would say, hey, listen, get on your bike and go down and get some milk for me. Well, I'd be in my swimsuit and, my sandals or whatever I had on, usually barefoot. And no, I had to have a nice clean shirt, a nice pants, socks, and shoes to take my bicycle down to Ed Hall's old grocery store, right, and pick up some milk, and then come back, and I could get back in my swimsuit and go swimming. So,
right.
But everything in town. I mean, we had my brother and I had suits and ties when we were little kids to go to church on Sunday morning, and you just had to have an appearance in town that nobody could disrespect you in some way. So
right.
That's kind of how you grew up doing that.
Right. Wow. You say some other things that trigger my questions that I want to talk to. You're talking about Ed Hall's grocery store. Now, I remember it at the end of Lake Street, but it wasn't always there?
No, it was in the center. I don't remember which one of the buildings it was anymore, but say where This Old Book, somewhere in the middle of that block. Yeah, and when I say Ed Hall, I'm talking about the father Ed Hall Sr., not Ed Hall Jr., who you would know.
Right.
Yeah, so they had it. I think it was a Centralia brand, and I remember being sent down, going up to the part where they had the meat and everything, and talking to Old Man Hall, and he'd always, well, how's your mom, how's your dad, whatever, and and get whatever I was sent to get, and then right, hightail it back home. So yeah, there was a grocery store right there. Wow. And then Rothundi's had their bakery just down the way. That was always a good stop after school for sweets or whatever. And then Hazel's. I think when I listened to your podcast with Charlotte, she didn't mention Hazel's, but I think it was called Ethel's or something like that, the store. But Hazel Lally had it, and it was right where the house is set back in on that side of the street, just down from the bakery, and the little store was like in front. And that was one of those things where if you're going to go get a gift for somebody or whatever, it was, ladies like to store a little boutique, which we never knew that word at that point. But,
right.
Yeah, so that was always there. Yeah, there were a bunch of different places. Across the street was one of my favorite places. There was a butcher shop just about where Milanis' office used to be, somewhere in there.
Hey neighbors, this is Bill Mock with the Grays Lake Chamber of Commerce. And if you're looking for a network of hard-working, customer-focused, and generally friendly local businesses who are dedicated to helping each other succeed, then I'd like to invite you to check out and consider joining our Grays Lake Chamber. We offer our members so many ways to advance their businesses through social networking events, special event sponsorships, informative lunch and learns, and the ever-popular after-hours mixers. Come see why we say we're the new wave of business here in Lake County.
And the guy that ran it was a guy named Soup Tagan. That wasn't his real name. I think it was Merrill. But he was always known around town as Soup, and he was one of our Boy Scout leaders. And Soup every once in a while would let words fly out of his mouth that our parents didn't appreciate. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, it was not kind of language that you get in today's world. Nobody would ever said those kind of things.
Right.
But once in a while, he might have said the word "damn." Holy smokes! That was not to be said.
Really?
In town. Well, remember Gone with the Wind when he's, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. That caused a huge stir You know, I mean, that was a big thing to have that word on the screen. You know.
Wow. Oh, as our world has changed.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But the kids loved Soup because he would say stuff like that, you know. He was like an old curmudgeon, you know. But he was a great fly fisherman, and I wanted to learn to fly fish. And my dad was very much worried that I had to spend time alone with Soup out on the pier, you know. Right. Sure, you know. So, but he finally, you know, my dad didn't know how to fly fish, so he asked Soup to teach me how to fly fish, which he did, and all those words came out, you know. So, but my dad didn't stick around. He went up to the house. He goes, "You and Soup do your fly fishing."
That's funny though. You know. Sounds like a character.
Oh, he was a great character, and then. He became a justice of the peace. And in the old village hall, which is above where the fire department is now, and that was this is where we met for Boy Scouts, and that was the village hall. It had kind of a raised desk. And Soup would go up there and dispense justice. And, if you're a Grays Lake kid and you got caught speeding a little bit, he's going to chew your butt out. But if you're from another town and you got caught speeding, right. Oh, he was going to tell you, you are not welcome in this town anymore. Get the heck out of here. Right. He didn't say heck, and don't ever come back. You know.
Really?
Oh yeah, he was tough. I used to love going up and watching when he'd sit up there with his gavel his judgments.
That is hilarious.
Yeah. So he was a piece of work. So.
Wow.
And then of course everybody talks about the old dime store.
Yeah.
With the dime store ladies. I remember one time I was doing something and I saw a nickel on the ground. Well, a nickel in those days would buy you a candy bar or some candy.
Sure.
Grabbed it, hopped on my bike as a kid, biked uptown, came into the old dime store, and here's Abby Turner, and she sees me and I said, I want to buy some candies. Well, they had a huge counter filled with all different kinds of candy. I'm just sitting there and I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking. Well, there were other people in the store and they needed her attention and everything. And finally, Bobby, choose something. I got other stuff to do. Okay, I'll have one of those. So
that's great.
A story that I told at her funeral, and everybody afterwards came and said, "Oh yeah, we had the same experience."
That's great. So the dime store was that in the same
129 Center is there now. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Because I was just trying to think on the face of Grays Lake when you talk about because this building was Ben Franklin as well, right?
Well, the building we're sitting right now was the professional office building. There were 3 buildings built at the same time.
Okay.
And then if you walk through into the other part of our building, then you're in the old Ben Franklin.
Gotcha.
And then on the other side of the wall is Emil's now.
Right.
It was pharmacy at that point. So. And down the as long as we're on this side of the street,
yeah.
I'm kind of, when Charlotte was talking about all these things, I'm going, well, you forgot about that, kind
right.
of thing. So where the Vine is now used to be a garage for fixing cars, and the street on Center Street had one of those kind of entryways like you would have for a driveway where the curb was cut down.
Okay.
And I remember going by as a kid, and you drove your car down in off of Center Street. They would do whatever they were going to do to it, and then you could drive back out the alley on the other side. So it's called, I think it was Finn Cutter's Garage. I think that's what the name of it was.
Finn Cutter's Garage.
Yeah. So, so that was always kind of a fascinating place. It was kind of dark in there, and you'd go by, and it's like, oh my gosh, what's in there?
Right.
There are a bunch of guys fixing cars. So, and another place I think Charlotte. I'm not sure whether she touched on it or not, is what was called Brandy's Corner. Okay, so that's across from the feed sales. All right, so there was a little building there, which you probably remember as Royal Radiator.
Of course.
Yeah, so that was a gas station. So I think it was called Brandy's Corner or something like that. And then turned into Royal Radiator, and then of course got sold, and now you got First Draft.
Right.
Is there, but when I was a kid, that was a gas station. But not my favorite gas station.
Where was your favorite?
That was Hugh Myers and Don Cannon had the Amoco, what it wasn't called Amoco back then, station across from the grade school,
right.
Which is now a little park, okay? And my cousin lived on, my aunt and uncle and my cousins lived on Harvey Street. So back again before driving days, he would take his bike and he'd come down, and I'd hop on his bike and we'd go down and hang around down at the gas station. He eventually got a job down there during his high school years and afterwards. And but we'd go down and hang around with Don Cannon and Hugh Myers.
At that gas
and I think
station.
they had to be, they had to kind of watch their language also when little kids on bikes were around. But,
right. I still, every time I drive by that corner up across there, I expect there to be a gas station there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that gas station, after a while, that turned, it was a garage or something as well, too. And they're fixing cars and doing everything there.
You always fixed cars. Well, you didn't just sell gas.
Right.
Not like today where you sell gas and then you sell, candy bars and popcorn or whatever else you're selling. So,
right.
And the two of them then moved out to the corner of Washington and 45. And I think they had a 3-bay gas station there for a long time, and then eventually sold that out, and both of them have passed. But, there was a good memory. Kitty corner across the street was Rockenbach. And God bless the Rockenbach family. They, whenever the fire whistles would go off, there was one on top of their building. Half of the people that worked for them would hop in and head down to the fire station to, go out to do a fire or whatever. And there was no rescue squad at that point. It was part of the fire department. So whatever was a problem, then those guys would do that, and the Rockenbach family always permitted them to do that. And so that was a great service in a small town to have a volunteer fire department, and so many of them coming from one business.
Absolutely.
That basically stopped whenever there was an emergency in town. So, so that was Rockenbach.
Yeah, I laugh at Rockenbach too, because everybody knows that as so many different things, which is now Casey's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And across the country, I remember driving down to Rockenbach to get our little posters that, like 1980s, they had like the Michael Jordan poster that came out or anything like that. Other thing I wanted to talk to you about too is that Charlotte and I talked about was Pete's Park.
Yes.
It's so fascinating to me to even think of that area right there. So tell me
so
your
if you know
memories
where
about it.
like the lamp is now, that also was a garage that became a different Rockenbach's hardware store at one point. It's gone through a bunch of, they tried to make a bunch of little businesses in there. But then right next to that, you have the big red apartment building or condo building. That was all that land there was Pete's Park. All right, and so it was something that had not the kind of rides you'd get at Great America or anything, but it had slides, and it had the things that you could jump on and they go around in circles, and monkey bars and that kind of stuff. It was basically a kids' park, and it went down to the lake of Gray's Lake, and people would come out of the city and they would go there for a Saturday or Sunday just to be in the park. There were a ton of those kinds of things. Gage's Lake had one, and there were a couple of them up in Lakeville and everything. But a lot of Chicago people would come down. They'd rent boats. They'd go out on the lake. My dad used to get really mad at them because they'd anchor a boat like 10, 15 feet off of our pier, and then throw all their garbage in the water, and including their glass beer bottles. And it's like, hey, kids swim here. You can't just throw that stuff in there.
So, and it wasn't a public park. It's a private park.
Yeah, you had to pay to go there. But most of our classes at the end of the year, we'd have our class picnic, and most of them were at Pete's Park. We'd all go down to Pete's Park, and so that was, all of a sudden it disappeared. It became Parkway Food.
Right.
So there's Ed Hall and Eddie Bauer. Tell you a good story about Eddie Bauer. But then, of course, it became the condo building. So my parents, and when we lived in the wooden house next to the current house, had a big grand piano in the front, and it just took up pretty much the whole room, and my parents wanted to get rid of it, and so they didn't know what to do with it. So Eddie Bauer said, I play the piano. I would really like to have that grand piano. So my mom and dad said, sure, come on over, take it, and we want to get rid of it. You want it? It's a perfect thing, So he brought a bunch of guys over on a Sunday morning, and they kind of had to turn it sideways to get it through the doors and everything. They took it out onto Lake Street, and then it had wheels on it, and they wheeled it down from my parents' house down to Eddie Bauer's house on Holly Court, and he played the piano all the way down Lake
I'm
Street,
sure he
walking
did.
along.
And I knew him really well, and I can imagine I could see him doing that as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Every time I used to see him and his wife Mary, she was a peach, and he'd always bring that story up. Oh, I love that piano.
I would love to have a photo of that.
Yeah, well, those back in the days where there were no cars on the street usually,
Right.
So.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
I didn't know that you knew those guys very well. That's
Yeah.
well, you know.
They're in Grays Lake.
Everybody.
Old time Grays Lake. Yeah.
Right.
The good thing about Grays Lake, it was small. I mean, when now you can look back and having had kids, you can say, well, it was safe. We lived by the gelatin siren or whistle. 7 o'clock in the morning, the whistle went off. 8 o'clock, be at work. Noon, everybody goes to lunch. 1, be back, and 5 o'clock, work's over. Well, for us, 5 o'clock was you got 15 minutes to be home, wash your hands, and be seated at the table because Dad's coming home and we're going to eat.
Right.
We ran our life by that. So, you were free to travel all around in Grays Lake. There were places like the railroad tracks where my parents didn't particularly want me.
Right.
But I used to come up to north on Lake Street when they were starting to build the manor and watch them building houses up in the manor.
Wow.
And that was big time. They're putting in a whole subdivision up there.
Right.
It was kind of cool. So it was a small town, so you were safe wherever you went. Everybody knew everybody. You could get, if you could get punished by your best friend's mom as well as you could get punished by your mom.
Sure.
It was a safe community, but when you're a little kid, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm trapped. I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. If I did something wrong in school, by the time I get home, my mom's already on the front doorstep waiting for me because the word got back. In today's world, that probably wouldn't happen anymore. But in those days, yeah. And the best thing was if mom scolded you. But if she said, wait till your dad gets home.
That's when you know you're really in trouble.
Oh, my God.
Right.
Quaking in your boots. So it's a great little town to grow up in. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and all through everything. It makes me think when you talk about Pete's Park, Jones Island. Was that because, Harvey ended up there, but obviously, coming back there, was that a thing when you were a kid?
No, the Jones family owned it, and there was really nothing on it.
Oh.
You could take a boat and you could go up. There's like a little waterway that goes up and takes a bend and goes back to create the island part of it. And you could go up there and there was just really nothing there. Pete's Park was the place where people went, and it was on the lake also. So
interesting.
But then, as Pete's Park shut down and the Park District came into being, and I don't remember there being a Park District when I was a little kid. I don't think there was really. But when the Park District came in and then took over Jones Island, they've made it into what it is today, which is awesome for the community.
Yes, big time. Yeah, no, it's funny because I think, how do these things come to be? How do the things that we take for granted or see that are all around, obviously a lot had to happen to make those things.
Yeah.
It blows my mind to hear you talk about them starting to build the manor.
Yeah.
that was probably a really big deal.
Well, for us, it was, when you're a kid, what you want to do is watch bulldozers and pieces of equipment, crate-based things, steam shovels we used to call them, creating foundations for basements. It was fun to go and watch the beginning construction on all that stuff.
Yeah, and even from my generation of being here, it's funny because the manor and Grays Lake, we separated those two things. Even when we played pickup baseball games, we would have kids, Grays Lake kids, and then against the manor kids.
Yeah,
it was
and we did
across the tracks.
We did it by streets. There was the Lake Street. We didn't call them gangs back then. I hate to use that word because it has such a negative connotation. But there's the Lake Street kids, and then there was the Westerfield kids, and then the kids from up the other side of town, and
right.
So and then when you were all friends, you all went to school together. They were some of your best friends. Were maybe on a different side, but all of a sudden you'd hear, well, the Westerfield kids were out playing basketball at St. Gilbert's. Oh, didn't know that. So
right,
which we did a lot. Go to St. Gilbert's and play basketball.
That's really fun. So if I got to come in and meet you and see that, I know we've met a bunch of times, but walking through your office, looking at all the photos on the wall, one of the photos that I absolutely love, is because we're talking about baseball, is the baseball photo that you have. Is that your grandfather in that photo?
Yes, yeah, 1915.
1915.
Yeah, called the Boys of Summer. It was their baseball team, and I guess they were pretty good at it. So, but he was on that team.
Wow. Yeah, and the photo, folks, is it looks like right out of a movie. Because it's a really cool photo.
Yeah, the old uniforms, and it's black and white, and the picture's black and white, of course. And yeah.
No, and I feel like we're at about 30 minutes right now, folks, and I think what we're gonna go over a little bit of your law background and some things you've done. But I think that we might need to split a whole nother episode and talk about a bunch of the other things that you have done. And just a little background. You served in the House of Representatives for how many years?
20.
20 years.
Right, yeah.
And sitting here, the reason I wanted to record here too, and Bob had mentioned too, just looking around this office, if you guys could see what I see here, from all the photos from past presidents, governors, and these people it seems like you knew a couple famous people.
Yeah.
Just a couple of them. For this episode, do you mind if we just jump in and tell a good fun story, and then when we come back, we can talk about?
Yeah, I think the most fun story for me was. I'll start from the beginning. It's August, the first week of August in 1988. Okay. I'm in the legislature. I wasn't the majority leader yet, but I was in leadership position. And I'm from the third largest county in the state of Illinois. And I was on Redistricting Commission, and there were all sorts of things that I was doing at that time. So one afternoon, I'm on the golf course, and this guy comes running up in a golf cart, and it says to me, he says, "Are you Representative Churchill?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Well, you have an emergency call. You have to call your office right away."
Okay.
And of course, immediately, who died? Is my mom okay, or my dad, or somebody? Whatever. What happened? Here. And so I run back in. I get on the phone, and I call my secretary, and I say, "What's the emergency?" She said, "You had a call from the White House. The president wants to have lunch with you. What should I tell him?" And your immediate response is to say, "Well, tell him I'll go back to my office and see if I can fit him in."
Right.
That's you're a smart ass about it. But it's like, what are you talking about? See, you say yes. I don't care when it is.
Right. So that was you had to come in to confirm.
Yeah, so Ronald Reagan had already been elected twice, so he was toward the end of his term. He was a really smart guy. The press always portrayed him as kind of a dummy. They always talked about his movie with a chimpanzee or something like that, making him look stupid. He was a really, really smart guy. And common sense and people. He knew, I think of all the people I've known my whole life, he probably knew people better than anybody. He could sense, could feel, and was the kind of guy that when he looked at you to talk to you, he wasn't paying attention to anything else in the world. He was just talking to you. And you felt that, and I think that's the way it was. He was
cool.
A very exceptional kind of guy. So it's like, well, why did he want me to come to the White House and have lunch with him?
Right.
Well, we were in an election cycle, and so even though he was going out of office, he was still very concerned about politics and very interested. And there were 7 swing states in that cycle, one of them being Illinois. Illinois used to be, could be blue or red depending on who voted. Really, did Chicago turn out, or did downstate turn out, or the suburbs, or whatever. So what he wanted somebody to come to the White House and kind of just brief him on what's happening politically in these 7 states. And Illinois being one, I was the guy that got selected to go have lunch with him.
That's awesome.
So we had lunch in the cabinet room, which is right next to the Oval Office. And he came in, he walked around and shook hands with all of us. And you can see from the picture on my wall, I'd seen him on other occasions. And I'd been to both of his Republican National Conventions. I'd been to both of his inaugurations. So, I tracked him. Not that he would have known me personally, but at any rate, so we sit down at the cabinet table, and there's a guy sitting next to him, and I'm across from that guy. So I'm sitting kind of kitty corner across the table from from Ronald Reagan. And so we chit-chat, and we have a, kind of a nice lunch, and we're talking about just general things and everything. Well, then he wants to go around the table and hear about what's going on in Illinois. Okay, so it comes to my turn. Well, I wanted to start it out a little bit differently than everybody else did. So I said to him, Mr. President, I want to tell you the winds of change are coming to Illinois. Illinois will be a completely different state after next week. And he looks at me kind of funny, like, next week? I said, next week is the first night game for the Chicago Cubs. Now, he breaks up hysterically about this, okay? Nobody else in the room knew what I knew. He had been an announcer for the Chicago Cubs.
I did not know that.
No. So he was born and raised in Dixon, went to Eureka College. He got out of college. One of his first jobs was being an announcer on the radio station. I mean, there's a ton of little radio stations out in western Illinois and Iowa. And so he was announcing the Cubs games. Now, obviously, he wasn't at Wrigley, right, so he had to do it off the ticker tape. So he would read, Joe Blow got a home run, and he would just, make it up. Oh my God, here it goes, it's out, it's going, it's gone. He got a home run.
Reading it off the ticker tape.
Yeah, but once in a while the ticker tape would stop.
Oh gosh.
And then he'd have to sit there and go, it's raining. It's starting to rain. Oh, we're going to have a short rain delay here. And he had to talk because you can't have dead air.
Right.
So, he would have to talk through these things. Well, I knew that he had done this. And he was a huge Cubs fan, and he had not, he's so busy with the world. He hadn't paid any attention that we were having our first night game at Wrigley Field. And he would just roar, and I'm sitting there going, I made the President of the United States laugh.
Right. Not many people can say that.
Yeah, right. So, anyway, that was the story.
Wow. That's really cool. So you've met him on other occasions. You've met other presidents as well.
Another short president story.
Sure.
So a guy named Sam Skinner was Northern District USA attorney. And when he stopped that, he became a lobbyist, and he used to come to Springfield, and he would always, hole up in my office. He ended up being the chief of staff for the father, George Bush. Okay. So I was invited to an event at his house, and I didn't know this was going to happen. But I told him, I said, look, I have about 12 events that day, and for me to swing by your house, I'm going to be a little bit early, but then I'll have to leave early. He said, well, that's fine. Come on by when you're ready. We'll be, fixing up and everything. So I get there, and he's chief of staff for the president, and all honor stuff and everything. And he says, why don't you go out in the garden? There's someone sitting out there. I said, okay. Walk out in the garden. Here's the president of the United States sitting there all by himself, just in a quiet moment in this little garden. And I sat there and talked to him for an hour. Just really? the two of us before the party started. I was an hour early, and so we just sat there and chit-chatted, just the two of us alone. It was so cool.
That is very cool.
And, talked politics and talked, just life in general and things, So there's always there was another guy, too, who was very, very sharp, but totally different from Ronald Reagan. He was head of the CIA, so he was really kind of stern. Right. And very determined and everything. So, but got along really well with him. I'd been to his, convention and everything, so he knew I was kind of on the inside of things. So that was kind of fun. That's my two stories of being with people who actually became president. Well, I served with Barack Obama in the legislature, but that was before he became president. Right. I served on Bob Dole's team when he was running for president, and did a bunch of those things, presidential things. Went to 5 national conventions.
Most people have no idea what to do with their aging loved one who needs help. Well, there is a solution. A company that provides care and assistance to make your loved one feel right at home. At Right at Home, their mission statement is to improve the quality of life for those they serve. They offer extensive services: personal and companion care, safety supervision and transportation, fall prevention, dressing and bathing assistance, medical reminders, meal prep, hospice support, ambulation support, stroke recovery, Parkinson's support. The list goes on and on and on. If you have an aging loved one that needs help, call Right at Home. Most people prefer to age in their home rather than moving to an assisted living or nursing home. Right at Home can make this happen. Contact Right at Home at rightathome@right.com nlc.com or give them a call, 847-984-0103. Now back to the show.
So I was pretty involved in politics at that level at that point.
Wow. Okay, so you've been to, like, going to inauguration, like, party like that. That must be a totally different experience, if anything.
Yeah, so they usually take maybe 4 or 5 states and put them at one big ballroom. I mean, there's no way you could have all 50 states at the same hotel.
Right.
So in the ballroom, so for the first Reagan inauguration, so you go to the inauguration, you're out in the cold and everything. It's January 20th, and Reagan gets up, puts his hand up, his hand on the Bible, and becomes president of the United States right in front of your eyes. That's kind of cool. And at that moment, it was a cloudy day, and the clouds broke, and a big stream of sunlight came down right onto Reagan. It was like, oh my goodness, here we go.
Wow.
What's that? So that night, I was kind of planned stuff out, and I scoped out the ballroom, and there were some balconies that were like right by the stage. And so I went and I said, well, how can I get up on the balconies? And the guy's like, well, you go talk to this person, you can reserve it. I said, okay. So I went and I reserved this balcony that was looking right down on the stage, where they were going to talk and everything.
Right.
And so we had, I don't know, 10, 15 people as part of my entourage, my mom and dad and, all that stuff. And so went to the inauguration, got there to the ball, and then it's time. They go to each one of the ballrooms, and they say some words, and then they dance a dance, and then they go to the next ballroom. That's how that works. So it was getting time for them to come in. So I had all my people up in the balcony looking down, right on the stage. And a bunch of congressmen are like, Bob, can we come up? Can we come up there? It's like, yeah, sure, join the crowd, because they all wanted to be up there too, So at any rate, so Ray, Nancy and Ronald come in. They address everybody, and then they go out and do their dance, and they're off, and then the rest of us partied for the rest of the night. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. A lot of fun.
Big party.
Yeah. I don't think there's probably a bigger party for somebody getting a promotion.
Yeah.
In the United States.
Yeah, right. Yeah, here. Welcome to your new office.
Right. All right, so we're going to pause right here, and I know that you've listened to it. I'm very honored that you listen to these shows, by the way.
Well, I have done, 35 of your podcasts.
35.
I was going to try to get to 70 before you came in to see me, but cut me short.
Right. And, yeah, maybe I should have had it on, that way you'd been up to speed on there. I'm just tweaking you along so that way you keep listening. See, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
And speaking of that, I want to thank everybody that listens to these because it is a time commitment and it's learning about our community, and I appreciate everybody. So we're going to do a little hot seat questions with Bob Churchill. Is that cool?
I see that you've actually had time to think about this and you've written them down on your
Hey, you know what?
Put them into your phone.
I have the same things on my phone all the time. It's just whatever I do with them or not.
Yeah, all those ones that you promised people you're going to change them.
Exactly. Thank you. Okay. And you're only on episode 30. It goes all the way through. All right, so this will be fun. If you had to have a superpower, what would it be?
I think I would like to be a time traveler. I'm fascinated by history, and there's things in history that I'd love to go back in. I mean, number one would be go back to the 3 days around the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. How did that happen? I mean, was the stone rolled away? Did the angel appear? All that kind of stuff. And be like Marty McFly, go back, don't touch anything.
Right.
You'll change history. So that would be kind of a fun superpower. Maybe go in the future enough to be able to say, watch out, there's going to be a bomb here, or there's going to be a hurricane that's going to devastate your community, and be able to warn people about it. Of course, that would change history. But
this is true, and saves people's lives at the same
exactly.
time. I know that you've been a lot of different places, but tell me a place that you'd like to travel that you have not been.
Okay, so my parents always took us around to see America. So I've been to all 50 states, and I pretty much got my kids to that point too. And then I started traveling overseas. I've now been to 73 countries, and I'm due to do the Balkans, which is 10 countries north of Greece, south of Austria-Hungary, next month.
Awesome.
And then in January to continue a trip that we were trying to take last January until the Israeli war broke out. which is United Arab Emirates and Oman, Qatar, and then come down the east coast of Africa, hit Tanzania and Kenya, and end up in Madagascar. So
Wow.
I have a couple of places in Europe I haven't hit. I've been to the Netherlands. Let's see, Norway and Portugal, and then at that point I will have done all of Europe. I've done all of Southeast Asia, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, China, India, Myanmar. I've done all those countries. So I'm more now at the point of trying to just pick up countries that I haven't been to. And the big hole is Africa, because there's so many countries in Africa. So I've been to the 5 southernmost countries there. I've been to Egypt, but there are so many different places that I'd like to travel in Africa and see that. And the problem is that there are a lot of those countries you just can't go to. I mean, I'm not going to Mogadishu, Somalia. Probably wouldn't make it out of the airplane, there.
Right.
So, and a lot of other ones just have diseases that you don't want to get near those diseases, and very unstable, corrupt governments, So you kind of have to pick and choose where you're going to travel in Africa. But there's so many countries there that it's just one of those kind of things I'd like to get there. Got a couple countries left in South America, and I pretty much will have finished that off. I think Costa Rica and Nicaragua. I've been to all the other countries in Central America. So, and then Connie wants to do Bali, so probably do. I've been to Malaysia, but I've never been to Indonesia, so probably do Indonesia and then just do all those islands off of there.
How fun.
And then come back through maybe the Philippines or something like that. So.
Wow. So you really haven't been anywhere?
No.
No. You're kind of a boring guy.
I just stick to my office here in Grays Lake.
Right.
I don't know. I just had the travel
Wow.
bug since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
My parents instilled that in me, and hopefully I've instilled it in my 3 daughters.
Yeah, and what a way to learn. I'm sure that every single one of those trips you've learned all kinds of, by seeing different cultures and different people and how things are run.
Yeah.
What's the place you'd never go back to that you were at?
India.
India.
Yeah. We did the northern half of India. I tell people, if you think you're a world traveler and you have not been to India, you're not a world traveler.
Okay.
It is the most different country that I've ever been in. The religion, we were on the Ganges River. They were immolating the deceased, and dumping the ashes in the Ganges River. And the next morning they go out and swim in the river, So, they have 3 million gods, and everywhere you go, there's a god to Shiva or a god to this or a god to that. The whole thing about the cows. Well, when the world was formed, Brahma came down on a bull. It's now called a Brahman bull, and they're totally religious. If you slap the back end of a cow, that would be a huge insult to the people there. We're on a train platform between 2 tracks, and there's a bull walking down there, just sticking its nose into people's popcorn, eating it.
Really?
Yeah. We're on an expressway going one way, and we had to stop because there was a toll booth, but there was a herd of cattle going through the other way. So you have to let the cattle go through.
Wow.
Just so many different things. I could, another 10 or 15 different things I could tell you that are totally different between their culture and our culture. People are clean, stores are clean, houses are clean. They throw all the trash out the window. So it's like driving through a landfill in some places.
Wow.
Traffic, unbelievable traffic. 1 million people in what they call the poverty industry. Emaciated ladies with these tiny little emaciated babies in the middle of these roundabouts with their hand out trying to beg. And that's their thing. They beg. Whatever money they get, they take back to their manager or whoever you would call it. Maybe if it was a different industry, you might call them their pimp. But they're put out on the street corner to make money, and then that's how they get their rights to live every day. Just so much that was so different. But
not going back to India.
No, I don't think I want to. I mean, I've seen that. I didn't make it to Calcutta or any of the bigger cities, but I think I'm good with having been in the northern half.
I think there's a lot of places that I would like to go just to be a fly on the wall to see it and just say I've been there. Don't necessarily want to go there.
Yeah, the Taj Mahal was beautiful, but we had to get within 100 yards of it to see it because it's so smoggy.
Really?
New Delhi, very smoggy. Not as bad as like Beijing, China, where if you want to see the big picture of Mao, you got to get even closer than that because it's it's so smoggy and pollution is really bad.
Wow. Okay, speaking of the Taj Mahal, next question: what is your favorite Grays Lake event to attend?
I would say the wine walk.
Really?
Yes. First of all, I'm on the board of the Heritage Foundation, so
right.
And I love Beer Fest. You're sitting here at my desk, and you can see we have the the little things with our advertising on. From the one side it says Grays Lake Beer Fest, the other side says our office.
Yes.
We advertise. We've bought the glasses for lots of years, and I love the fireworks. We were at the fireworks, 2,000, 3,000 people a week or two ago.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was
Unbelievable.
great. If you didn't get there and get a chair in the ground, you weren't going to be able to do it.
Right.
There's just so many people. But the thing I like about the wine walk, first, there's a restricted number of tickets. Okay, so it's not one of those things where you can just go on it. You have to have a ticket ahead of time. But you go into every one of the little stores. And you go into these. I mean, I would never. I'm not going to go to one of the little boutiques. Maybe
Sure.
I'd go visit Marcia someday just to harass her about being a Packer fan. But
Right.
that's I'm not going to go into that. And there's no reason for me to go into any of the realtors, places. They all bring their contracts over here if we represent them or whatever.
Right.
So, but actually, you get to go in and meet the people who are working there, see what the shops look like and everything, and it introduces you to the town. Connie now takes her granddaughter shopping, brings her here to downtown Grays Lake first, before they ever go to a mall or anything.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, I mean, she and I were in the same class in high school. She's a Grays Lake person. So, but, most people get in the car, they go to the mall. Now, because she knows the little boutiques that are down here and what they have, they'll come down here and do their shopping. And so I think the wine walk opens that up for you to go into all the little stores.
Right.
I would say it was probably 90% women that were on it and
Sure.
10% men. But I appreciate doing it, and it was just fun.
Yeah. No, I love that. And then you get to actually meet the people that are running these businesses.
The people I listen to on your podcast.
Right, exactly. It opens up I know so much more than I did before. Let me tell you that, something I have no idea about.
Yeah.
Your first car you've ever had?
1964 Plymouth.
Okay.
My dad had an estate of a very old lady that had this old Plymouth. I can't remember how many miles were on it, but probably not very many.
Right.
And he bought it from the estate, and then that was my first car. You see all the movies, American Graffiti and all that stuff. Everybody wanted the hot cars, the hot rods and whatnot. But to have wheels was freedom. You could hop in a car, even if it was a little old lady's car, and it was a little old lady's car. And so I went out and bought one of those horns, the Auga horns, and I put it on there. And so, at least when I'm driving down Center Street, and I see some of my friends in their hot cars, I could just Auga them, So it kind of took it out of a different level of being an old lady's car to,
right.
Oh, wow, it's an old lady's car, but he's got a great horn.
That's funny. What color was that car?
It was light blue and not dark blue, but not so light blue. Okay, there were two shades of blue on the thing.
Right.
Yeah, and it was definitely, you'd see it driving down and be like, there must be a little old lady in that car.
But the horn did it justice, so that's good.
Exactly.
How about a first live music concert that you attended?
Yeah, so didn't have much of that when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a big thing. But then when I went to Northwestern, they did have them. I saw Simon and Garfunkel, Mamas and Papas, Brooklyn Bridge. There was a bunch of old things that you would look at as old, but
right.
Yeah, that's what I saw that. Of course, then a little bit later in life, did 2 Elvis concerts. That was kind of fun. Frank Sinatra a couple times,
Nice.
that stuff. But that was downtown in Chicago.
Right.
I would drive down to Chicago and see that.
And you also got to see Eddie Bauer, the piano man, rolling down in Grace Lake too.
The piano man. Yeah, if he was still around, I would call him that.
Yes, exactly. Extraordinary individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny.
Oh.
But when he and Mary were talking to you, you're in hysterics.
And entertainers.
Yeah.
And yes, open up their home and have everybody. Really fun one that I want to ask you too. Well, first of all, do you have a nickname?
because you're Robert, they call you Bob. If you want to call it a nickname, it doesn't sound like much. In school, a lot of times they would just shorten Churchill to Church. Hey, Church, that was it. But nothing other than that.
Have you ever eaten a roller dog from a gas station?
Many times.
Good for you.
You know,
I do.
when you drive back and forth to Springfield and you're hungry. Here's a very quick story. When they put in Casey's, I walked down there. I walked during the lunch hour to get my steps in. I walked down there to get a roller dog, and they didn't have any.
Do you know how disappointed I was?
Oh, my gosh.
I was a flag waver for them, and I walked in, and...
I was looking forward to it.
I know. I went in there to actually take a picture for the podcast the first day that they opened. I went, no roller dogs.
Yeah.
So now it's just breakfast pizza.
Yeah, and the guy that was down there, Sal, when I was there, he had Bada Bing, which I used to go to all the time for Chicago dogs and his Italian beef and everything. So it was like a homecoming. Where have you been? He says, well, I had an operation, did this and that, and now I'm here. So, stop by and see Sal.
Wow. Yeah, no, they're doing great down there. I like having it there. My boy likes the breakfast pizza, so I have to go down there all the time now, no matter what. All right, if you had to have a theme party at your house, what would it be?
Probably something political. I don't know. Everybody come dressed as a president or something. Get your Teddy Roosevelts and your Franklin Roosevelts and your Abraham Lincolns and whatever.
Right. Did you play a sport in high school?
I played football, and then I wrestled for a year. I was on the golf team. That was pretty much it. But loved football. That was my thing.
Right. And then on to your studies after that. No more.
Yeah, right.
So how many years of college did you actually do?
7.
7. Wow.
Yeah, 4 in undergrad and 3 in law.
Wow. Okay, so because you've met a lot of these people that obviously a lot of people will never have the opportunity to have those connections and things like a Ronald Reagan, or if you had to bring one of them to Grace Lake, what would you show them in our town?
Well, in a year or so ago, I would have taken them to Fred's.
Yep.
So a lot of people that are in politics come here. Just when you've been doing something for 40 years, you have a lot of wisdom. Sure. And I don't knock on doors and do phone calling anymore, but I can share what I know and how to set up campaigns and stuff like that. So Bob Dole, D-O-L-E, or Dole, D-O-L-D, not Dole, with an E on it, was running for Congress, and he came here, and I took him over to Fred's, and that was then his favorite place.
Really?
So whenever he came, he was basically from the shoreline. Whenever he would come west, he always went to Fred's.
Wow.
So one day he's coming in, he had a bus full of people, and they were going to hit a bunch of places. Went to Fred's, then we went to Hillside, and we were just hitting different places around. So he could go in and politic, and the people who were with him could politic also. So anyway, there was a photographer and a lady that were with him, and they were from some press or whatever. I didn't pay much attention to him or anything, and they're snapping pictures and everything. And then the next day, I find out, in the New York Times, there's a picture of Fred's.
In the New York Times.
In the New York Times. Picture of Bob. It was one of the tighter races in the nation. They were doing a story on it, and that was who it was. The lady wrote the story, and the pictures were of Fred's. So I cut it out. I blow it up, cut it out, run over to the girls, and say, "Look at this! You're the New York Times." And they were like, "Oh my gosh! The New York Times is talking about Fred's in Grace Lake, Illinois."
Wow, that is a great story.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I loved it, but. Yeah, we used to have a lot of, everybody always had fun over at Fred's. Just
absolutely,
the chit chat back and forth.
Yes. I'm looking at our time right now, and I know that I have about 2 more questions to answer, and then I would love it if you'd invite me back to really talk about.
You're invited.
You. So
well,
and we get to know a little bit.
I like telling stories about other people more.
Right, there are usually a lot more fun. Hey, bartender, can I have a?
Friday night would be Stolichnaya Orange.
Okay.
Straight. Saturday would probably be slipping into wine and maybe J. Bavay brandy. That's my favorite brandy. Sunday afternoon, maybe gin and tonic, and then switching into scotch. There's a bunch of us that drink scotch, including your buddy, Mike Steiner.
Yes.
He and I drink some scotch together from time to time. And that's pretty much it. I don't drink during the weeks, unless maybe after a golf game I'll have some beers. But,
sure.
Weekends, relax, enjoy,
Nice. Nice. I appreciate your time, and I'm sorry that I had no reflection on you that you're number 70, number 70 something. But we're gonna.
I got something to hold over your head.
Exactly. If you're not giving me crap, then I know that you don't like it. So that's a good thing. You know what? Let's because we have like 2 more minutes. I know you have an appointment coming in. And my favorite thing of the questions that I love to ask are, what do you wish that you learned sooner in life?
Tons of things. I have this appetite for all sorts of different parts of life that I would love to learn, and I really have nothing. Everything's come along at the pace that it did. It is, as we say, it is what it is,
right?
And that's how it was.
We learn along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So we're gonna end there.
Okay.
We're going to end there, and then we're going to come back, and then we have a ton of things to talk about. A couple of the things that I really want to go over is your George Bailey list.
Oh, okay.
I think that's something everybody will have to look forward to. That I'm really interested in talking about that, and a lot of other things, because you've accomplished so much, you've done so many things, you've been on so many different organizations that I think it would be a disservice rushing through. So
okay.
I'd love to come back and
sure.
talk to you. All right, so Grayslake, thank you guys so much for listening. No matter what listening platform you're on, I appreciate if you guys would subscribe. That way, every week when a new episode comes out, you will be alerted right on your phone. So Apple or Spotify or YouTube are usually the most popular ones, so make sure to subscribe on that. And as I leave everybody every day, please do me a favor. We never know what our friends are going through, what our families are going through, so do at least one random act of kindness today to make our town better, our world better, even if it's just sending a text to somebody just saying, hello, how you doing, just to reach out. So be good to each other out there. In Grayslake, thank you so much. Bob, thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you, and we'll see you next Tuesday, everybody.